Speaking of the temporal concept of lateness, let's segue into starting a meeting. Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the March Koha-US General Meeting. It's March. That means February happened and time moved forward and we're here again, astoundingly. I feel like we just did this.
Yay.
Which is a statement on the amount of crap I've done between meetings. So I still don't have a special guest for us, but I have lined us up a special cereals expert guest for next month to talk about cereals. I guess that's my first announcement as we stumble clumsily into the agenda.
Is that Lucky Charms or Cheerios or what kind of cereal?
I had Cinnamon Toast Crunch this morning. Cereals module. Jason has a sticker. You're not looking at your video. Yeah, so next month we'll have Jay-Z from Bywater and special guest librarian to be named to come talk to us about cereals. We'll try not to make it too deep in the special library technical aspect of it all. Try to also talk about what cereals might mean for a public library. But I do think our cereals usership overall is probably a little bit more like your special libraries, your law libraries. But it's a fun module. I think they'd be excited to maybe show some people things they'd never thought about doing with Koha before.
Yeah, we gave up on cereals module, just trying to wrangle it through items.
Yeah, I saw your email to the cataloger, SIG, I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're not alone in that. There are a lot of sort of smaller or less cataloging intensive libraries that just sort of figure, oh, I can put items on things.
Also, it turns out the person who was doing the cereals just put barcodes on things and didn't do anything else. If we're going to get caught up, it'll take a while. On the other hand, I'm not sure if anyone cares enough.
That's like a fun discovery.
Yeah, that's it.
My next announcement is that the development committee has officially pledged $4,000 to getting MARC modification templates in Koha to use to interact with MARC indicators. That was the result of our election last year. So that is finalized. That covers half of the cost of that development. So at this point, we're waiting for hopefully somebody else to jump in and pick up the other half, or maybe that's what we do for our project this year. But that has moved forward. We have pledged that money, signed that contract. So if you know anybody who's sitting on a little money they want to put toward MARC modification templates and MARC indicators.
And what exactly is that amount?
The total cost is 8,000. Koha-US has put in 4,000. So we've got 4,000 to make up there.
Thank you.
Certainly. And then my last announcement is that Juliet has kindly volunteered to take over the sysadmin SIG. So she's going to do that, which I'm very thankful for. And that will allow the sysadmin SIG to not change times. So I can go do a different schedule conflict. Those are all my announcements. I've abused my podium.
Wait a minute. Sorry, I missed it. So the meeting time is not changing for sysadmin?
Correct.
Okay.
The West Coast people really didn't want to go another hour earlier into the day, and I get that. We don't all wake up at 5:30 a.m. every day. Does anybody else have announcements?
Sort of. I submitted my introducing Koha poster to the Medical Library Association conference. Came back, one word, declined.
Well, their loss.
Sorry to hear that.
Oh, well.
The slight pause for other announcements.
I mean, we could talk about the developers forum that we had. We had
Yeah,
a really
by all
good
means,
turnout
please.
there. Go ahead.
Can I put that in new business and we'll move on to new business? Recap
Sure.
of the developers forum. That was a delight to attend.
I'm sorry, I missed it. I saw some discussion of making it annual, and I would like that because then I can go next year. When my life is less busy, right? That's what next year will be.
Wait a minute, there's a comment in the chat. Heather, are you retiring? She is.
Yes, I'm officially retiring on April 30th, but I'm going to still be volunteering with the Koha community, so I'm not going anywhere because y'all are fun.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And thanks in advance for your continued work within the Koha community.
No problem. I want to keep some of my mad skills active.
Andrew's just happy he doesn't have to find a new person to run the cataloging group more than anything.
It's not even the person to run the cataloging group. It's the person to be the psychic face of cataloging within the Koha community. Heather's so good at like pretending to clutch her pearls when the situation calls for it, like
Pretending?
enacting the cataloger outrage that we all require.
Surely you've seen the picture of Heather clutching her pearls.
I'll put a link in the chat. I am looking forward to y'all continuing to bring your expertise, though, because, you know, I won't have to keep up with RDA.
Here, watch this. I'm going to use the new batch modification tool to remove all the indicators from our catalog.
I mean, it'll be fine. They've still got titles and barcodes. What more do you need? Okay, now we're really out of announcements and really moving into new business. Meeting structure, here it is. Hey, George, would you care to give us an update on the Koha Charitable Foundation Steering Committee?
Why, yes, I would. The steering committee met on the 17th of February, and mostly what we talked about was the mission statement part of it. It was a very weird meeting because the chair of the group couldn't be there. Well, forgot that it was happening that day. So he wasn't there. So it was a very weirdly unstructured meeting. But we did get out a mission statement, and Andrew has prepared a document that he is probably going to share with the community this week, talking about our progress and what's going on, and sharing that draft mission statement. And one of the things that we're trying to build into the structure of this committee is to make sure that there's representation from libraries, not just support companies, and to make sure that there's international representation, intercontinental representation. So we're trying to work on that, and there have been a lot of suggestions about how to achieve that. So that's pretty much it. The big thing will be when Andrew, we're talking on Mattermost about the document that he's produced to share with everybody on the status update document. But I expect that'll be out by the end of the week.
And that's
I put it
Andrew
in-
Auld of PTFS Europe.
Oh, yes, not the Andrew here in the room, but Andrew
Yeah.
from PTFS Europe.
He shared that on Mattermost earlier, George. I put the
Oh,
link
did
in
he
the
share it
chat.
today or
Yeah.
yesterday?
Yeah, recently.
Okay.
The Koha community dev meeting was an hour and a half ago, and in that he said he was going to be releasing it very shortly. So that tracks. Brief pause to acknowledge the fact that we're all going to go look at that document, and nobody's going to pay attention to anything we say for the next 45 seconds because we're all like that. But in the interest of proceeding this meeting, we could all do some offline reading and return to this. But yeah, questions for George about Koha Charitable Foundation Steering Committee. It seems like none at this time. We'll see if we return to this topic at the end of the meeting after everyone has read the document. But while everybody reads the document, let's move on to our next bullet. Vote on addition of conflict of interest policy to the bylaws. Christy has been looking at those results. Thank you, Christy. Would you like to report on how that went?
Yeah, so let me start by saying I've never reviewed vote results for anything Koha-US related before, so it's been a little bit of a learning curve for me. So I have a couple questions that I'm going to go over with the board on just like, hey, it says this here in what somebody submitted, or is this cool? And we're going to discuss that at the board meeting next week, just because I've never done this before. So but overall, I mean, this is not going to affect the outcome of the vote. The vote passed to include the COI statement. We had between 35 and 45 results or responses to the form. So thank you to everybody who did vote. I think that's a pretty good turnout for one of these. And yep, thank you for your participation.
I just noted that you voted twice.
Oh, so I removed all of the, so you and I had 2 responses because we were testing the form initially, but I did remove those. So I did not double count those. It's my first vote count, not my first spreadsheet rodeo.
And I know there exists room for us to like tighten our election process to require login of some sort to really like make sure that everybody who votes is a member and everybody only votes once. And it has not been my feeling that any of our elections are such big affairs that it's prohibitive to check the results against the member list, but it does sound like we could maybe, I don't know, write up some process documents there or something. Because when I certified the election results for the development committee and the conference selection, it was similarly like, oh, I guess I can kind of make up what certifying these results means. It's not defined anywhere, but I don't know, count and make sure they got to vote. They were, yeah. So thank you for that effort. And we'll get official results after we clear up some ambiguities at the board meeting.
And thank you again for voting. And thanks, Wally, for helping to test the form.
Any other conflict of interest or election feedback or questions? Inspiring Stalin quotes, maybe. Inspiring might not have been what you were going for, but I'm inspired.
Heard enough of those last night.
Well, then let us move on to the 2024 financial reports, the main event that everyone's been waiting for.
Nobody run leaving, please. That's what usually happens when the spreadsheets end up on the screen. There are 2 reports that are presented to the general membership every year as a result of what is in the bylaws. The first is what I call the pretty annual report, which has a bunch of numbers, but also does have some prose. The other is what I call the 10K format of our financial status, which is the consolidated 2024 report as linked into this agenda by Christy. We did have a good year in that our income exceeded our budgeted income. We had a budget of $5,025, but our total income, and this does include the income from the Bywater sponsored Koha Community Challenge last spring, $6,814.30. We've never had a scenario where we have not met our budget, or certainly have never come to a circumstance where we have never brought in enough income to be able to clear everything that we've paid in a year. So it was another good year. Considering expenses that are not funneled off to the discretionary fund or the cash balance, our actual expenses last year were $3,188.89. 10% of our income goes to the cash reserves, our rainy day fund, that was $682. And the big money in terms of what this organization does, the remainder of our income, $2,943.41, went over to our discretionary balance. We exceeded our membership income as well as our conference registration income. Where we ran into over expenses were related to the conference, particularly food and beverage. We did pay what seems to be an awful lot for compliance last year. That was due to a change in the state of Kansas filing requirements for nonprofits. We now pay $80 every 2 years to file what the state calls an information report, not $40 every year for what had previously been called a nonprofit annual report. We also spent quite a bit on marketing, $550 versus $300 budgeted. A lot of that was in support of what I call generic printed things in support of the conference that we hand out. The big numbers in terms of the discretionary fund, and these are the numbers that get reported to the board whenever anybody asks about what we have to spend for developments and that. At the beginning of the year, this was before we signed the MARC modification templates contract with Bywater, our balance available was $10,331.43. We can now take away $4,000 of that being encumbered. So our actual amount that I will tell the board is available at any given time is currently $6,331.43. It was a good year for membership. We did see a decrease of two. But we've recovered nicely from what had happened during the pandemic. Page 8 of the annual report has a very nice table that I put together every year that goes back to what I call the very beginning, when Robin Hastings grabbed $10 from George and went to a lawyer. We got our nonprofit status certified, and that's the $10 that Robin went to open our bank account. We're doing very well this year as well. This is reflected in the general report that not everybody looks at because, quite honestly, it's mostly numbers and just boring. You'll notice we ended last year with 120 members all told. This year so far, we're already at 99, and that was just through the end of February. So we are looking very good with regard to membership. There's a lot more to read and talk about. If you've looked at my annual reports in the past, this follows that same basic format. I've had it in this format for a number of years. And if you really want to look at breakdowns by quarter and individual nitty-gritty subcategories of income and expense breakdown, the consolidated 2024 report that's linked here will provide that. I trust you. If you need a good nap, and Heather can vouch for this, there's RDA, but there's also the financial reports that are available. I'm glad to entertain any questions anyone has. Before I turn it over to that, I would like to say thank you, Georgette, for her service over the past 2 years as the treasurer of the organization. I look forward to working with Wally in his new role as treasurer for the next 2 years, and I am honored to continue to serve this organization as its financial manager. Are there any questions about either of these reports?
Thank you, John. I enjoyed working with you as well.
There are never any questions. I told Wally yesterday during our meeting, nobody asks questions. I've been giving these reports since 2018. Nobody asks any questions. If you think of a question, email me, financialmanager@koha-US.org. I'm glad to address any questions that you might have. The board, you get a week to look at this, and then you get to talk about it again next week. Although, since everybody's here and I've talked about all the real highlights, I expect next week's board discussion may be just as fast. Thank you.
I want to come up with a question to really like hold Wally's feet to the fire, scare him. I don't know what.
Not a
Not
question,
com-
just a comment, but John does a great job, and I really appreciate the work that he does, especially since he's at a library that doesn't even use Koha anymore. So thanks, John.
Absolutely.
You're welcome. I'm glad to continue to be able to serve. As everybody here knows, if you've worked on a proprietary system, what I do now would just be like, what? Absolutely not in proprietary land, but this is open source land. And I've gone from a Koha user to a Koha enthusiast.
We appreciate you and your enthusiasm.
He's also a very good teacher.
That organizational continuity is worth an awful lot.
Absolutely.
All right, pause for financial report questions or feedback. But hearing none.
Yeah, I
Oh.
have one.
Aha.
Do you have plans to invest all the Koha assets in Bitcoin or some other virtual currency?
No, but we are actually looking at putting our money securely in a longer term interest-bearing account at PNC Bank.
Similar. Should koha-US make a Bitcoin?
Only if John explains to me what they are.
Is it time for NFTs to make a comeback?
Oh, God. I hope not.
Give it another couple years for people to forget what they were. All right, we'll do responsible things with our money. High interest savings account. So boring. Well, that moves our meeting into open discussion about bugs, issues, etc.
Oh, well, were we going to go back and talk about the
Oh, yeah.
Developer forum?
Yeah, just on the assumption that probably everyone in the meeting has skimmed it by now.
Oh, the developer forum?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having a brain. I appreciate it. I got distracted by BIGcoins. Developer forum, the thing that Jason was going to talk about that happened last week.
Sure. And I don't actually have any like thing great and glorious to share. I don't have stats or anything. I know that we had like 40 people show up, which was more than we expected. That was great. Bob did a great job moderating for us. We had developers from New Zealand, Germany, Martin from PDFS Europe, as well as Lizette. I don't have the list in front of me, but we appreciate their input and they're taking the time to talk to us. I thought, from a personal standpoint, I thought it was really worthwhile to hear directly from the developers and sit in a room together and just talk. Christopher's processing the recording, I think. I don't think we've got that posted just yet, but that should be coming out. And yeah, I think it was a good event, and the education committee will be talking about it at our next meeting coming up in March about where we take it from here. And
Yeah,
if you're
I'm
interested in helping, please join the education committee.
I am cleaning up that video. It's partially edited. I'll have that out this week.
Cool. So yeah, watch for that as well.
Awesome. Any questions or feedback on the developer forum?
Yes,
We do
that,
have oh, sorry. We do have a form that we sent out as sort of a little evaluation as well. So if you need that link, I can share it. We'll probably share it again with the recording so that people that watch the recording can give us their feedback about it, because we do want to know how you felt about it and use that to sort of shape moving forward. Sorry, Fred, go ahead.
okay. Yep, sorry to come in late. Just I have to go unmute myself. what was I going to say? Just what's really impressive was the developer who said he went to user training, so where people having difficulty. That's the first time I've ever heard of a developer do something like that. I know they wouldn't in Horizon, our old system.
I like Bob's point about developers benefiting from FaceTime with users in a variety of ways. Like, I think that is true and accurate. Like, it's invigorating to see people who are directly like appreciative users of the things that you've made. And probably also good to like be reminded that they exist and they're people and their needs and feelings are valid.
I'd also just like to thank Bob for moderating the panel.
Happy to do it. It's easy when their responses are interesting. It's not hard to just let them talk and, you know, ask questions as, you know, as they say interesting things.
Yes, they were a good group because they kept the conversation going. So you didn't have to like grasp for topics to talk about or pull answers from them. They were very good.
Even better, I understood most of what they said.
I thought I understood most of what they said.
You played it back later and it's all smoke. Okay, I'm gonna try
Patty
again.
Brannon, the now retired director of the National Library of Medicine, once said, "Most of the time, I understand most of what most people are telling me. That's pretty good for an administrator."
Fair enough.
I'm having connections issues, but one of the things I was trying to say there is one of the things that it brought up for me is the idea that, you know, we've done some training events with like jQuery and SQL and other training events that we've never repeated. And I think that's one of the things that came up for me is this idea that there's always new people. So it's not a bad idea to repeat these things. And we've recorded them, but, you know, it's not a bad idea to repeat them and do live sessions and update them, you know, once a year or so, because there's plenty of new people here that don't know how to write a report or don't know what they can do with the CSS features or the jQuery features or any of those things. So it doesn't hurt to, we think we're repeating ourselves, but the new people don't. So I thought that was something I learned from it too.
Yeah, that seems like a good perennial reminder. Okay, now we're going into open discussion of bugs, issues, and etc. For whatever bugs, issues, and etc. people have to discuss.
I am throwing out a bug in the chat. This cropped up yesterday after our upgrade. You know, there are certain things that you just don't notice until you get into production. We've had the upgrade on our test server for a while, and it's like then the things start crawling out of the woodwork as we get into production. So I'm as we are going through this meeting, I'm actually debugging some bootstrap stuff. You know, I've added some bootstrap buttons in places that don't work because they don't have the right class. Now I got to go through and add the right classes for those buttons to work again. And funny enough, it's a bunch of BS. It's there's BS in the class that's supposed to be in there. So it's like Go figure. But anyways, this bug has nothing to do with buttons, has everything to do with transfer slips. There's a bug where when we got upgraded, the transfer slips, not the hold slips, but the transfer slips are not showing the branch for some reason. And Bywater's been working with me on that. The patch is there, but it's not slated until the next version, and it's supposed to be ported back to this version. And Bywater was even saying that we were going to apply it yesterday afternoon, but it doesn't look like it at this point. So I can't confirm whether it fixes it or not, but that is an issue. And outside of the things that George and I mentioned in one of our previous videos with the cursory overlook of 2411, I think this is probably the most significant.
You have the bug number for it?
It's in the chat. It's 38748.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Christopher, if I'm reading things correctly on my end, it looks like that patch got put onto your server at 10 a.m. this morning.
I just tested it and it's still not working. So it is not fixing the issue.
I might not be reading things correctly on my end either, or like there might be some next step that needs to happen to really completely get that code on your site. But yeah, it does look like there's a code or a patch, and it should be fixable short term. Got it quickly.
Hopefully it's okay to share this. In case you missed it, Bywater posted this in their Slack channel, their 2411 bug roundup, which is something we talked about with the last upgrade, where we thought it would be nice to have a list of known issues so that we're not always opening tickets that have already been reported and getting a response back that says this is a known issue. So I wanted to share that.
Cool.
I have one. I don't
That's
know
helpful.
who else might be using booking, but there's a bug in 2411 where if you try to edit a booking after it's been submitted, it can't. You'll get a fail message. There's a patch out for it already, but again, it's waiting for a version to be included in. Let me see if I can find the bug here.
It's on the spreadsheet that Jason listed. 39212.
So I have a question, or just a thought, and this is going back to the developer forum as I'm editing and listening to the forum. One of the things that was brought up was, the need for updating Koha code, because it's just, something that's added on to all the time. And I understand that the code needs to be refreshed and modernized at points. But the big stopgap there is that the expense and the time that it takes to do something like that. And I'm curious, it got me thinking about this, and I was wondering if it's something that the community might think about and consider. Anybody have kind of Andrew, if anybody might have a pulse on this, do you have any ballpark idea of how many instances of Koha are out there being used by I mean, you at least know how many customers you have.
Someone has that number. Yeah. That's a good question. I would maybe wonder what the Heya community site says.
Because I was thinking, what if Koha adopted a workflow of, I don't know, I'm just throwing a number out there, every 5 or 7 years, the community were to say, okay, the version being put out this year is not, this year we're not going to put out 2 versions. We're going to put out 1 version. We're going to dedicate on code overhaul. And so no new features. And the primary focus is to modernize code that year. So every 5 or 7 years or however long, they choose to do that. And customers dedicate a certain amount to that cause. I don't, with the number of customers out there, I mean, if every customer were able to contribute $100, how much would that be? And would that suffice to cover the expense of doing something like that? I'm just spitballing thoughts and ideas, not saying that $100 is sufficient, or the number of people out there that can contribute is accurate, but just thinking, what if the workflow of development were to incorporate something like that, so that it is part of the progress of Koha, rather than, well, we'll get to it if we can get to it ever.
I see where you're going. It's a pretty different development model than Koha uses now, just because it assumes a more like prescriptive structure than we really have. So like this release cycle, we've got a couple of sprint goals of like things that the community's trying to do. One of them was the big tidy of all of the code that happened last month. And that's sort of a step in the direction you're talking about, of like really trying to define some specific infrastructure goals. And my sense has been that that's been a little bit of a struggle, just because that's not at all how the developers have worked as a group in the past. It's much more of a bunch of individualistic weirdos who show up and work on what interests them that day. And collectively, that moves things forward pretty well. It does seem like the foundation might be a good step in that direction, creating a centralized organization where there just is not one right now in any real sense. Overall, I think these are good ideas to take to the Koha community development meetings, because that's really where like that agenda would need to get set. I think you're right that that is a need that exists and is unlikely to get met by accident, because it hasn't happened so far. Like nobody just sort of decides, hey, today what would be fun would be a deep infrastructure project, rather than a fun new feature that a librarian is going to be excited to see show up.
Right. So Fred posted that Marshall Breeding reports 4,478, and technically, if most of that group were to contribute $100, that's almost, well, it's just under $500,000.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nothing to balk at. I mean, that's a good chunk of change contribute.
True,
Is
and that's
this-
just US like self-reported people. And then the HEA site I linked to lists 19,000 libraries. That's again just the people who are running Koha and flipped that system preference to say, do tell this website that I've got a Koha instance.
Is this something that needs to be pushed more at Koha Con as opposed to on our Koha US level? I mean, this is not like a Bywater thing. This is more of a, let's go back to New Zealand and get them to look at it with the sheep. I don't know.
Let's get Chris on it.
But I guess what I'm asking though is this is a bigger than Koha US thing. So it's going to take a community push to bring it from a back burner to something that is maybe like Christopher is proposing, a standard thing that is done every period of time, whether it's 5 or 10 years or whatever the case may be, that it's addressed, because otherwise it's going to stay on the back burner and stuff's just going to get written on top of stuff and it'll end up being just like Microsoft and be clunky.
Although, talking about it here is a good start, because I mean, if like Koha US can get behind an idea like that and bring it to the community, then it has a stronger voice and a better potential of moving something forward, rather than one person coming to a developer meeting and saying something.
Yeah.
And maybe it's something that we could talk to other user groups to get behind.
And I agree with Heather's comment in the chat about a lot of libraries, don't have money to throw around. But again, if this plan of action is, so to speak, set even with libraries that are on such limited budgets, if they can plan for it far enough in advance because they know it's coming, then it's easier to let go of $100 that is a big chunk of change for that particular library than just springing it on them, we're going to do this next month.
And that's why I say, every 5 or 7 years, it gives the community ample time to, number one, get the enhancements and bug fixes that they're looking for. But 2, $100 to some libraries is a drop in the bucket. Other libraries, I do understand that, that's a lot, to their existence. But, over 5 or 7 years, if they're chipping away at setting that aside for this drive and project, I mean, that's a worthwhile project to set aside for and contribute to. I mean, everybody would be able to afford to contribute to modernizing Koha, which not everybody looks at something, looks at Koha and says, well, I have nothing. Not everybody has the drive to fund a bug or whatever. But and in the bug, as itself, when you're funding a bug, it's not cheap. This is a cheaper thing to contribute if everybody is taking part in working towards.
I think Christopher's comment also should be everybody is a relative term. In other words, there are going to be libraries just can't.
Right.
And then, but there are other libraries that are bigger groups that may be able to make up the difference of that and put in $200. I mean, you know what I'm saying? So I think,
$1,000.
yeah, exactly. So I think everybody is a relative term. It should be pushed as something we would like everybody to participate in as they are able.
Well, and there is absolutely no mechanism within the Koha community, be that koha-US or Koha International, for making this anything other than voluntary. Like, there's just no way we could say all Koha users chip in $100 every year or 10 years or whatever, because we have no way to know who has downloaded the software. And really, like, it'd be interesting to watch the community reaction if we pushed for some mechanism of tracking that in order to, like, ensure we get that money. It would go over very poorly. It'd be interesting.
But I am not suggesting that we do anything of that sort. But you know, I think that, you know, if the community were to get behind, you know, a voluntary drive to help modernize, you know, the code, you know, and explaining, you know, how, you know, far apart these drives are and what's being asked, you know, a suggestion, it could be doable for a lot of people, and we might get more response out of it in that manner.
Yeah. And again, the foundation could give us a good way to actually handle that money and that relationship, to employ a developer as a community to do these sort of bigger, longer term things.
But, you know, it could just be me dreaming about, you know, helping the cause along. But, you know, it was nice to listen to what I've listened to so far in the developer forum, and, you know, be inspired by that. You know, if you know, if anything, if people are hearing what's going on with the development and the hurdles that they have to overcome and the things that they face, you know, it's like, you know, me as a non-developer, you know, if there's an idea I can throw out there and, you know, that we can discuss and cultivate to get to some of those goals that seem unattainable at the moment, I think the developer forum pays off in that it's inspiring people to think that way. It's done that for me. I was the one that actually asked for the forum, and yeah, I was really thrilled to see the turnout for that. You know, it's getting people to talk and to think and collaborate in levels that weren't necessarily happening on a consistent basis. And, you know, maybe, you know, those forums can happen more often.
Yeah. We have 8 minutes left in our meeting time, and Heather wants to talk about stuff.
I just wanted to chime in to say too that I think bringing the faces of developers to the community through that event and the recording also personalizes in a way that's like, you know, we're not just funding developers, we're funding work for these people in our communities to, you know, and then when we're using our system, we recognize the work that's happened. It makes it almost tangible for everyone.
Well, and I hope that also makes it feel approachable as a user to know, like, okay, bookings are being weird in this update. My friend Martin wrote most of the bookings code. Let me send Martin a message and ask, hey, what's going on here? Because ideally, I think all the active Koha developers are pretty comfortable with that speed. They're on Mattermost. You can go over there and ask them questions.
And, you know, just seeing their faces, you know, makes them human. Where I think, you know, if you've got these unnamed or these named developers, it's a lot like the great and powerful Oz that's behind the curtain. You know, you put a face to this, and it's like it really humanizes them and helps the users and the developers be more relatable. And I think we have achieved something with that, and I think that we have something to work off of going forward to help bridge that gap. So I'm really encouraged. I think that this forum did achieve some of its goals through, that meeting.
Good. Seems like we've discussed that topic thoroughly. But when I try to move the conversation forward, someone unmutes and says a thing, which is great. Please understand, I'm only saying this to give you time to do so. But it's 11:24. We've got 6 minutes left in this meeting. Anybody else have deep thoughts? Trivial thoughts? Song and dance?
I have a totally unrelated question. What's up with the conference? How are things going? Is there a venue? Are there hotels? I need to start planning my budget.
Oh. We have a conference planning meeting immediately following this. There is a venue. We just got the contract for the venue yesterday. So look for more there. It sounds like we're not doing hotel blocks because that has become less and less actually feasible. So there will not be an official conference hotel. But I know OSL has been working on compiling a list of hotels and restaurants and such things in the area, so that those resources are forthcoming.
Yeah, and Jason, one of the things Renee commented on was they're not going to tell you what hotels they do not recommend. They want you to figure out that based on the ones they do recommend.
I forgot this part. Yeah, there is a specific hotel that they would not recommend, but they do not wish to put on a list somewhere as a don't stay here hotel. So talk to Renee and Steve.
And the irony is that's the closest hotel.
And the cheapest.
So yeah, put on your detective hats. You have all the clues you need.
It's like Encyclopedia Brown, only without the dog. Oh my God, Encyclopedia Brown. What made me think of that?
I don't know, but I haven't thought of him in years.
Neither had I until 30 seconds ago.
A request to the committee. Could you include directions on how, if possible, to get to the venue and hotels from the train station, Amtrak station?
Oh, sure. That's very reasonable. Well, with the East Coast of it all.
Yeah.
Can remember that trains exist in other parts of the country.
Yeah, I didn't ride a train until I was about 30.
Andrew, did we use this link or the other link for the meeting?
We'll use the other link.
Okay.
So yes, when this ends, we'll take 5 minutes and then meet in the other link for the conference planning meeting.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. With that segue, I think this meeting is coming to an end. Start the outro music. We'll slowly shuffle off to Buffalo.
I won't see you next month. I'll be on vacation, taking my mom out of Graceland.
Oh, enjoy.
Yeah, thanks. See you later.
Right.
Farewell,
I'll be at
everyone.
the conference.
See
I'll be at
everyone
the
later.
conference meeting.